today we start to say goodbye to the retro room. Forever. Well, not exactly forever, but forever to this retro room. In case you missed my announcement during streamer news, my family are moving. We are moving. We finally bought our first house, which is a momentous occasion, especially in this terrible year. On top of having a kid, we bought a house. Pretty cool stuff there. But that means that this studio will be no more as of a couple weeks from now. We've been working on it off and on here and there. It's going to have taken us by the end of it at least a month to have fully gotten the house ready and moved in. And it will take me a long time to actually fill in the new space and new set as I have here. And that's kind of what I want to talk about in today's video. I'm EposVox, the stream professor, and this has been my recording and streaming space, even though I haven't had a whole lot of time for streaming, at least, casual game streaming and stuff ever since having a baby. But this has been my stream room, my retro room for retro gaming and just kind of decompressing, like literally, even in its early stages, if I was stressed or just wanted a breath from all of the world's problems or things going on, I could just walk in here and just enjoy the vibe for a second and get a little bit of stress relief. And that's kind of what this has been. It's also been where I ended up shooting my videos ever since having a baby, and my main living room set of sorts got destroyed as it became a living room that has all our baby furniture in it and is always a mess because we're new parents. And then my dedicated studio room, which was our third bedroom in this apartment, got turned into a baby room and storage room for my gear, so it wasn't really useful for shooting B-roll either. And so I have taken what started as a fairly empty and boring room, turned it into, something that was kind of cool, and then further turned it into the most, optimized for my brand and presentation room that I could within this space. But I have some future goals for the next space that we'll also talk about in this video too. You see, my goals for this video are threefold. To briefly kind of touch on how the room got to where it is over the course of the past 2 to 3 years that we've lived here. Cover the current setup, where it's at now, and how I have utilized a big multicam setup to get the best, most out of this space, and how I optimized it to look like a much bigger room than it actually is. And then 3, to talk about my plans for the future, how I plan to make it better, and what the new space looks like, and all that. Before that, I want to tell you about this video's sponsor. This video is brought to you by Nerd or Die and their new Glitch 2 Cyberpunk 2077 themed stream package, which features overlays, alerts, be right back and stream starting soon scenes, a whole chat box theme, and stinger transitions, along with other elements specifically designed for the Cyberpunk 2077 game's theme. Now, this is actually available as a free update if you already owned the Glitch 2 package. This is something that Nerd or Die does regularly when they add updates or new features to packages you've already bought. You don't have to pay for them again. You just get that as a freebie. So if you already owned Glitch 2, then you can get the cool new webcam frames and the social media icons and all the new theming for free. Otherwise, pick it up for yourself. It is Glitch 2 with the Cyberpunk 2077 edition theme, available at eposvox.gg/nerdordie. So to briefly run you through the history of this room, my wife and I had to move apartments very last minute back in 2018 when our previous apartment flooded for what was essentially the final time that we could stand, and we had to change apartments because they just weren't able to and weren't going to fix the problem that was flooding our apartment over and over with us still in it. And as far as I can tell, even though we have moved out and they have moved at least one other family through the apartment, they still haven't actually fixed the issue, but that's another story. We moved in here, and previously we had a 2-bedroom apartment in which one of the bedrooms was my dedicated studio shooting space and things like that. But as with all of our apartments, I eventually outgrew that, and that mainly kind of became a storage space and where I got creative with my B-roll but all of my A-roll, my on-camera part here, was shot downstairs in our living room on the couch in front of our big desk setup, which looked really cool, and to a degree I really missed that setup, but we had gotten really cramped and stuff, and so this was a nice, lovely upgrade anyway. And to be fair, we haven't really outgrown this space, at least until getting a baby, and since we were already occupying so much of it, having all of that extra baby stuff thrown in there was kind of a little too much. But once we moved in here, we now had 3 bedrooms instead of just 2. One was still a dedicated studio shooting space at first, but then we had this room, which was the smallest room in the house, not really useful for a whole lot, but my wife suggested turning it into my retro gaming room, my game room, where I could, just separate work from play and do most of my gaming at, which seemed like a really good idea. So whenever we moved, I unloaded all of my gaming stuff in here, and I had a couple little clips where I shot where just everything was still piled up, still waiting to be assembled. And over time, I put up my shelf, my big old game shelf here that I actually got from my parents when we moved the first time into my first apartment, and you've seen in the backdrop of a lot of videos, and that was my main game storage. And then I actually ended up a little later buying a cheap little TV stand and putting my TV on it, which was my flat screen. We still have it. It's still going to be our bedroom TV at our new place. However, it is my TV that I've had since 2009. I bought it for my 16th birthday using savings and birthday money and all of that. Like, that was my big buy. Unfortunately, it's a great TV. It's lasted this whole time, 1080p, but unfortunately HDMI 1.3, which means it was made right before ARC came into play. So any surround sound receivers and stuff have been a nightmare to use with it because it doesn't have ARC. But that's besides the point. And it had a nice little setup going there for a while. I didn't really use the rest of the space as you see it now with all of this stuff. I didn't really use this effectively. I had some like storage bins and things like that, but really this side wall here was my main set, so to speak. So I had the black shelf, I had my TV stand, the TV on it, and then a CRT monitor as well for some of my retro systems. And I had a lot of consoles hooked up, and I played games and shot a few reviews in front of it. In fact, some of my, more popular videos were actually shot in front of that set for a little bit. And I was fine with that, kind of upgrading and adding in little furniture and, shelves. And you can kind of see we have a shelf up above the neon sign there that holds a bunch of storage bins and things like that. I upgraded it a little bit over time, hung all the shelves that I could, but didn't really utilize this half of the room a whole heck of a lot. And then came the time for the video where I ended up getting a lead on getting this big old beefy CRT you see here. This is a BVM D24, which is a 24-inch broadcast video monitor, a professional video monitor from Sony that was designed for use in broadcast stations and things like that. Made in the early 2000s, I believe mine was, like 2004, I want to say. It supports all, retro formats. So you've got 240p, 480i, 480p, but it also supports 720p and 1080i, but still through analog processing. So I can play through adapters. I can play my 6th generation systems, my PlayStation 3, my Xbox 360, and even newer stuff. I'm hoping before we move to squeeze a video with the new consoles out on this, but I could play on 720p or 1080i, although 720p looks better on this system. And then certain games out of the original Xbox and PlayStation 2 also support 720p or 1080i modes, although on PS2 that's more of a rarity, but there were quite a few on the Xbox. The problem is, this thing weighs a ton. It weighs like 120, 140 pounds, I want to say, and my little particle board TV stand that I picked up off of Amazon wasn't going to cut it. Plus, it was way too low to the ground. The thing sits like 3 feet off of the ground. I would be creaking my neck to look down at this. So I wanted to build something where I could have it mostly at eye level, so it would still be usable comfortably for gaming, but also with enough space so I could actually set up a proper streaming setup here. Little did I know this would turn into my main video set, but here we are at the end of 2020, and I have shot most of my videos on this since having a baby, and it turned out to be the perfect video set. So for my birthday / Father's Day, my dad and I built out of plywood, basically, this big TV stand and entertainment system here that holds the 120-pound monster of the BVM, holds my monitors, my lights, my camera mounts, all of that, but also has just the right amount of space for all of the retro systems I want to hook up. So from right to left, top to bottom, I've got my audio, my AV receiver, which supports component composite, all of that for surround sound. I have some really cheap 5.1 surround sound speakers hooked up. I've got my PlayStation 3. I've got my Go XLR, which handles my main microphone audio here, as well as my headphones and all the routing from my stream computer, and the AV receiver is hooked into that. And then at the bottom, I've got my tape deck. I've got a DVD VHS combo player in case I want to watch movies here. Sega Dreamcast, Nintendo 64, and Xbox 360 Slim. Moving over here, I've got my GameCube, Ultimate Modded video coming soon. I've been working on this video for over a year. It is almost done. Sick system. It also has really sick lights, as you can kind of see there. This little pocket right here is for video switchers. So I have my cables to go 6x2 component matrix, which allows me 6 component inputs, which can be composite too, but component and optical audio inputs, and then 2 outputs. And so I can either split the output one like to a capture card and then to the BVM here, or I can do separate outputs. So I can have like my PS2 running to the BVM and then the PlayStation 3 running to the monitor or something like that if I wanted to. I primarily use this so that I can route consoles directly to the BVM for native analog video, and then route the second output to my upscaling units to then go to my capture cards for capture and streaming. And so with that, I also have an HDMI selector switch here from Monoprice that is 8 inputs, 1 output, that connects things like the HDMI of the DVD player, the Xbox, the PS3, and then some stuff from my computer all routed through here, which also then goes to a capture card, but also a lag-free component adapter, which then runs it back to my BVM. So right now, I have it off. I can turn on the BVM and connect the computer to it. And so once it kicks on here, I just have my normal computer output connected to it at a 720p signal, ready to rock. And then lastly here, I have another extra component splitter because I had not yet had the bigger splitter I was waiting on, which I'll touch on in a moment. I have the G-Comp switch on the back of the computer, which is an 8 input, 2 output switch. And then I have the XRGB Mini FrameMeister up here as well, which is an upscaler unit that takes S-Video, composite, RGB, and component all through there and can upscale and de-interlace and things like that. But I also run the component outputs through that G-Comp switch to the open source scan converter and the RetroTinks and things like that, depending on whatever I want to use at that point in time. Moving down in shelves, I've got height room to like stack stuff or add a smaller shelf if I need to. I've got the Wii U, I've got the PlayStation 2, I've got the analog Super NT Mini, which is a Super Nintendo FPGA system. I do have a real Super Nintendo, but I usually use it for capture testing, so I keep the analog one here. Sega Saturn, and then Sega Genesis and original Xbox on that bottom shelf. I've got a nice little headphone hook here on the side, which allows me to quickly hook my headphones, and then pretty much everything else is desk mounted. So we can talk about that as well. Here on the left for the side view camera, I have, both of my cameras are Sony a6400s with Sigma 16mm f1.4 lens on both of them, and then a Black Pro Mist filter on each of them as well. This left-hand side mounted camera here is mounted with an Impact Super clamp, and then the Impact Super, articulating arm here, which works perfect as kind of a Elgato multi-mount alternative. And then the main A6400 back in that corner, which is as far back as possible, is mounted on an Elgato multi-mount. And then I've got the Elgato Keylight Air and the full Keylight here ready to go, set up on the Stream Deck buttons, so I can quickly turn on and off my lighting as I wish. And actually, I'm going to keep those off for a minute while I continue explaining the setup. And then continuing our desk-mounted accessories here, we have a cheapo Monoprice 4K monitor. I bought it in like 2015. It's honestly a piece of crap, but it gets the job done for what I want to do. And it's 4K, and it's mounted with an Arctic monitor arm that I covered previously with my ultra-wide video. This monitor arm is a beast, works great here. And then I have behind the BVM a Vivo extra tall monitor arm designed for you stacking monitors or whatever to mount my BenQ 1440p 144 Hz monitor off to the side here, which allows me to view chat, multi-view from OBS, whatever I need to see while I'm doing streamer news or whatever. And then clamped to that monitor arm, because it's just a giant pole that sticks straight up, I have 2 things. One is a Mathellini clamp, which is just a little clamp that goes around grip poles and things like that, sticks out, and then attached to that clamp is a grip head, which you would normally see on a C-stand or something like that. And then in that is a big old microphone arm, which just comes over top here and is my main microphone arm for my main microphone for this setup, which is the Sennheiser MKH416 shotgun mic, just run into the Go XLR. I've made a couple of videos now on this microphone. Best microphone you can buy for a lot of circumstances, as long as your environment is sound treated. And I have that set up here. By the way, this is what the setup looks like if I don't have the lights on. While you can't see me very clearly, it is quite the look. Like, this is perfect, like neon vibes, and I absolutely love it, but I will improve on it for the next, iteration. So when I was building out my streaming setup here, I wanted to accomplish a couple things. You may have seen my previous video about the streaming rig I have here. I called it the most imbalanced streaming rig of all time because it has a Threadripper 3960X, 24 core 48 thread processor but then a NVIDIA GTX 1650 Super graphics card. And that's because just for encoding, you don't really need a ton of graphics horsepower or anything. And this is at the time was the cheapest graphics card to get the new Turing NVENC encoder, and I wanted that option. Now, since I do my streamer news streams in 4K and things like that, it does struggle a little bit with compositing and rendering the 4K scenes on OBS for that card. And so at some point I plan to upgrade it to like a 2060 or something to give it a little bit more horsepower there. But for normal 1080p, Twitch streams and things like that, totally fine. The reason I went with such a overkill processor that you totally don't need isn't actually for the encoding specs, because when I originally set this up and I was only really running one input, I was using an 8700K. The Intel platform, especially the consumer platform that is very limited, however, on PCI slots or PCIe lanes and then USB ports, and I wanted to add a bunch of webcams and capture cards and things like that. In fact, this streaming rig currently now has 10, I believe. Yeah, 10 current inputs, 6 of which are 4K 60 compatible inputs. I've got 2 AverMedia Live Gamer 4K capture cards, a BlackMagic Decklink quad capture card, which does 4 4K 60 inputs, and then a Magewell quad input capture card that does 4 basically 1080p, but 2K by 2K, so 2048 by 2048 inputs on it as well. Now, I have so many for a couple different purposes. One, to handle the different outputs that I have configured here, and 2 is for multicam, so I can do crazy different camera angles here for different setups depending on what I have going. First, let's tackle the different inputs, which is why I actually recently upgraded to the Magewell quad capture card, and I can't wait to test it more in the future. So I have a bunch of different outputs going now that I want to capture depending on how I have things configured. I have the HDMI output from my HDMI native consoles, so the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and Wii U, and then I want the flexibility to add other HDMI systems. But then there is also the upscaled output of my retro system, so the FrameMeister or the open source scan converter, whatever I'm using there. So already that's 2 different inputs of different types of capture that I have routed, and because of how everything's already switched, it would be really messy and dumb to route that through separate switches or anything like that. However, I also want to be able, as part of my review process, I also compare these upscaler units. Like, I've been working on the big episode 2 to my upscaling retro game series, which turned into a mini masterclass of its own, and I want to be able to quickly and immediately compare, say, the FrameMeister to the open source scan converter, or the open source scan converter to the RetroTinks. And now there's like 3 different RetroTinks. And then I also have a new device that I'm making a video on that has 2 different video outputs at the same time, and I need to be able to capture those at the same time and sync. And so that's where that quad Magewell card comes in handy, because the Magewell cards, especially the PCIe ones, are so flexible with retro formats in the first place. In fact, they accept native 240p over HDMI, and they accept all the weird formats of the analog scalers and things like that. And I want to be able to run basically all of them at the same time. So that is where those different inputs come in. And then I also wanted to do multicam. So I already have my standard like video production setup where I have my main A6400 here. I got a matching one on the side. Previously, this was a Panasonic G7, but I could not get them to match correctly enough. And I wanted the flexibility to, when I'm doing the unboxing segments and streamer news or something, quickly hold something up and you actually see what it is in focus and adjust back. And the Panasonic G7s have really terrible autofocus, and none of my lenses for it are autofocus. Sony has wonderful autofocus. So I've got my standard 2-camera multicam setup here, but then I expanded it, and my plan was actually to expand it more. I had 2 different Panasonic G7s I was also planning on hooking up here, but in one case the mounting didn't quite work out, and the other, the angle just became redundant, so I just didn't bother with it after a while. But I do still have other angles, as you've already seen in this video. I have my overhead camera view, which is actually the Ecamm 22 webcam I reviewed a while back that was HDR, which actually works out in my favor here. This is clearly a blurry, compared to my 4K cameras, a blurry kind of pixelated mess because it is a webcam, but you get to see an eagle eye of my entire space. And for my game streams, at least, the plan was that I'd be able to get up and be like, all right, I'm gonna walk over here, pick out this game from my shelf, be like, yeah, I'm talking about this game over here. Walk back over. Hey guys, we're playing this game, pop it in, whatever, and create a general kind of hangout room vibe. And I wanted to be able to capture that, and this contributes to that possibility. But also getting the correct mounting up in the corner where this camera is mounted. The G7 was just so heavy that it kept falling down, and I just could not get it mounted the way I wanted. And so to creatively problem solve, I have an extra webcam. It doesn't look great, but this angle doesn't need to look great. So instead of trying to rely on that for an up close or like important webcam angle, I've got that up in the corner, perfectly fine. Similarly, I have the back angle here. This is actually captured with a knockoff GoPro from a company called DB Power. I've covered it previously in my videos about webcam alternatives. It is a 4K GoPro knockoff that doesn't work super well quality-wise, but it does work over USB as a USB webcam. Granted, the quality is terrible. I wanted another one of those angles from here so you can see when I'm, messing with my consoles, unplugging stuff, switching things around, doing a lot of maintenance in this room. The idea was that I would have streams where it's more of like a hangout in this room than just playing games alone. And so having that different angle. However, to, problem solve for it looking like crap, I've added a scan line overlay and converted it to black and white. And between that and the noise levels that it already has, it kind of looks like a security camera. So I get this nice little cool security camera vibe to it. Now, if I turn off the scan lines, you can see this is it and converted to black and white. And then I can come into my filters and turn off the color correction filter. And this is what this camera normally looks like. It's trying to compensate for way too many different light levels because the big red glow from the neon sign is coming in here. It was like impossible to get the colors to look right, and the camera was never really sharp or nice looking anyway. And so instead of just having, what most people do when they have a bad camera is they just throw it up and deal with it. Instead of just having this really crappy side angle and be like, sorry guys, I gotta upgrade. I did a little bit of color correcting to fix contrast and colors a little bit, but then I also cranked down saturation so it's mostly grayscale. There's still a tiny bit of saturation, and fixed it up a little bit and then added in a scan line overlay. And now we have a nice little security camera look. Again, creative problem solving. I had this, it didn't work great, but I could, solve this. Now for the next camera angle, I actually need to go ahead and use this angle so I can get up and turn on another light. All right, the next angle here is actually what was supposed to be used for my Twitch streams, which was this one, the vinyl cam. Now it looks like crap. I can't get the angle right anymore, and it's not worth messing with since I'm not using it. But the idea was I actually have quite a few vinyl records that I can use that are stream safe because they come from publishers and, record labels and companies that have denoted that they are safe to stream with, such as the Midnight and things like that. That I was, gonna have a cool vibe where I could pop on a record, you could watch it spinning while I have to go BRB or whatever, or I could have it as a little bit of an overlay in the corner when we're having a chill stream, and I thought that was a pretty cool angle. Now this is using the Logitech StreamCam, which I am not a huge fan of. I think it looks like crap, but for this purpose in a corner, it would actually look pretty good. But for now, it's just a static angle that sits here. Lastly, we have this angle, which is a little over bright because it's not normally set up to look at my face, but this is the AverMedia PW510 webcam. And I typically have been setting this up to use as my unboxing station here during my streamer news show. So I usually have it pointed down, hanging off my monitor mount, pointed down at the desk here. So you can just kind of see the edge of the desk so I can, unbox and show off things that are too awkward to show on the side camera. So for example, here's this nice Weeble S gimbal here that I used to get the B-roll of this room. I can show it off here without having to have it, and especially for some of those bigger boxes, which I couldn't just awkwardly hold up to the side angle, this worked out great. It's still a little bit noisy because it is a webcam, and that's why I had it so blown out for my face, because it's blown out to compensate for this darker surface here, but it's pretty cool. And it worked out pretty solidly. So just with that alone, and you don't need amazing, cameras for this, and for a lot of it you can use if you have older phones or you buy cheaper, older, like broken phones, you can use all of the phone as a webcam options I've been showing off lately. You can mount these up and do creative stuff with them as well. Now, I forgot to mention that back camera is actually just connected over USB with a big 50-foot USB 2 cable, and since it's not transferring a bunch of data, it's doing an MJPEG stream in 720p or whatever. It works. It powers it and runs it all over USB, and I could just hide the cable behind everything. So that's the multicam stream setup, and the way and the tricks here are in the camera angles, the shallow depth of field lenses I have here, and just having so many angles are how I make this room feel big. Because again, this is the smallest room in our house, and it's not very big at all when you actually come to look at it. Like if I make a little overhead angle here, if I actually step out into this room, I am in the middle of the room right now. I take up most of the floor space. Like this chair takes up a ton of floor space. So when I was working on videos like my chair reviews where I had these big old gaming chairs side by side and was trying to get b-roll of them. That's why the angles are sometimes really awkward and things like that, because the space here is super cramped for a lot of that stuff. Now, if we're talking about the rest of the room, let's go ahead and look at what all we have here. I've got, again, the TV stand. This is up against the wall here. To get the best angle here, I have my main camera in the far corner of the room, as far back as I could get it, wide angle out to the rest of the room, which gives a little bit more depth because you're looking to the farthest opposite corner, which gives you a lot more look of a depth with the shallow depth of field, makes the room look a lot bigger. And same thing with this overhead camera. It is in the far top corner of the room, pointing down at the rest of it to give it a much bigger vibe. Same thing with the back camera here, back corner pointed at the rest of it, gives, with the fisheye wide angle lens, gives it a little bit of a vibe. And then this side angle is as far up against this mirrored closet door as I have, pointed at the rest of the room, which just gives you a better angle, but it's so close to me that it blurs out the rest of the background. Talking about the rest of the gaming stuff in the room here, I mentioned my main gaming shelf here. I've got a CD rack on top of it with some of my PlayStation 1 game collection. I've got another CD rack with some of my music collection, just little highlights, and I've got game manuals, collector's edition statues, things like that stacked up on top of it, and I just build that up over time. So as you may have seen in the earlier days of this, not all of the walls were hidden. I consider myself a master of kind of optimizing small spaces for maximum kind of aesthetic and, you know, getting things to look on brand for me purposes by just slowly over time, or I can do it quickly if I need to, but just making things more and more dense. I started out my entire YouTube career just in my one bedroom that I lived in when I lived with my parents. And so to optimize my space, I just learned to pack more and more into, you know, more densely into the space that I have in order to make it look better and get the most out of the space. So I've got that whole towering shelf with games, collector's editions, things like that. I've got a few little like collector's edition boxes and a stack of PS1 games at the bottom that I haven't really had space for on that shelf. I also have some VHSs and some of my game magazine collection. I still get some retro gaming mags subscriptions. Of course, we have my pride and joy, my giant original PlayStation neon sign. I don't believe this is officially licensed. You know, it wasn't directly from Sony, but this actually hung in the main window of a retro, or not a retro, of an actual gaming shop that I shopped at ever since I was a kid. And a few years back, they went under and had a liquidation auction. And this was one, I bid on this and a few game lots. Unfortunately, they also had a couple smaller signs for Xbox and GameCube that I really wish I had gotten. But this alone was like $300. And at the time, I did not really have any money. And I definitely didn't have the space to store this. This is like 4 feet by 4 feet. And so that's the only one I ended up with. But I wish I could, I really hope to get more for the new space, especially that are different colors, because that red is really harsh on the skin, which made it very difficult when I wanted to shoot back there or like depth for having room for my big camera rigs. That's part of the reason I switched to using mainly my A6400s here. Even though I have much better cameras, they require big hefty tripods and stuff, and in this tiny room I did not have the space to set up tripods and lights and stuff. That's why I'm such a huge advocate of these little key light LED panels from Elgato. They may not be the best lights in the world, but they are so small that for this small space it works out great. And the same thing for my desk setups. Along with the PlayStation neon sign, I've got the blue lightning bolt, the faux neon that my wife got me for my birthday or Father's Day or something, the cat neon back there that my one of our viewers sent in to my P.O. box, which is linked in the description below. I always unbox those on Streamer News and stuff if you want to send anything for Season 3 and for the move. That blue glow coming from the corner is actually a Quasar LED tube, but it's a normal white one. I've just taped up some blue gels to it to help give some blue casts, to try getting like a, you know, red blue gradient going over here to kind of compensate for all the red. The TV stand with the little mini CRT, that is a Commodore 1702 CRT. It is a wonderful and incredibly sharp CRT. However, it is dying. It needs some like caps or something so the image will randomly like flicker really bad. It's kind of hard to game on anymore, which is unfortunate because it worked fine until I had a baby and then left it off for like 2 months and it just didn't work anymore. But I'm hoping to get that recapped once this whole human malware situation is figured out. But I've got some games stacked on it with a Creative iRoar speaker stacked on there that I reviewed forever ago. I've got a Japanese Pokemon VCR on top for tapes and just given the blue glow here. And then it's got a VHS DVD combo on the bottom just for space. That TV stand is one I was actually going to make a video on for the second channel at some point. It's from 2008. It was designed for the PS2, GameCube, and Nintendo 64 era. And it's really cool because it's on wheels. It's got enough space to put your TV or whatever you want on top of it, and was kind of built to still have a CRT on it, but allow you to upgrade to an LCD because it was from that weird transition era. And then it's got little kiosks, or cutouts rather, for game systems, and it's got a little shelf buffer there if you want to put your games on the bottom, and it's got little mounts for your controllers on both sides, which was pretty sick. Picked that up when we went thrifting at one point. I picked that up and got it. Actually, a lot of the furniture in here is from thrifting. Moving on from that section, which has a big wire shelf hung at the top for like totes and games and cables to keep out of the way, we move on to this part of the room, which I'll cut to this angle here for, and you see this nice little cube shelf. Wow, my frame rate is dropping here. So this is one of the issues I run into with this BlackMagic card in the system. I think I have too many capture cards running at once, and so sometimes like it'll be dropping frames even though OBS doesn't report anything, and it's like the capture card or the PCIe bandwidth or something being like, no, just deal with me here for a minute. This is one of those cube shelves. I just picked it up from Target. However, it is only 11 inches by 11 inches. They usually come in 11 by 11 or 12 by 12. I wish I'd gotten the 12 by 12 because it would actually hold most of my vinyls, whereas this doesn't really hold my vinyl. They're all too big, but it holds magazines, game cases. I've got a bunch of my own custom printed Game Boy cases made out of DS cases. Got my little Halo shrine of games, got trading cards, collector's editions, and then I've got those two little PVM CRTs that were actually they're hooked up to Raspberry Pis, and they were supposed to display like old retro commercials and stuff, but I had to take the adapters from them, so they've been powered off for a while. Got my Master Chief helmet neon sign up there, just a blue light bulb in a lamp in the back there. Got my little Core i9 box because it's tetrahedron, because it's so cool. Got my Halo 3 helmet from the Halo 3 Collector's Edition that I picked up forever ago and made a video on. Super stoked to finally get that. The Doom Eternal helmet, I had to put that next to it. Another little CD rack with some music and games. My PSX system, which is not a PlayStation 1, it is a PlayStation 2 DVR box. Pretty neat. And then I've got my Diablo standee from when I worked at GameStop. That was the only real big merch thing I could get from them, and because I worked there when Diablo 3 came out. Grabbed that, took that home, have had that since 2012. And then we have another stand, which is where the turntable actually sat on. And that is a little like hexagon table. The hexagon table is actually pretty cool. It's something that my parents actually had two of them growing up. They're from like the 80s or something, and they just kind of kept them because we always had hand-me-down furniture. They had them in our basement and kept their vinyl collection in them. And I always thought it was really cool and just a great way to store vinyl. And so I ended up finding one at a Goodwill and thrifting at some point and took it home specifically for that purpose, to store my vinyl collection and my laser discs. And so that is the purpose that serves. However, I went looking for a second one back when we picked up that little TV stand, because I filled it up with all of my vinyl and laser discs and needed space to expand my collection. I found one more, but I didn't really like how it looked. Like it had a big old bright paint coat on it instead of the natural wood paneling look, and I just didn't like it. However, that's when we ran across that little table with the nice glass doors and stuff, and so I picked that up instead. That has some of my bigger like multi-disc collections of vinyl, as well as my trading card binders and things like that in it, and then it was also a place to store my drinks because my TV stand couldn't really hold my drinks and stuff like that, but now it just overflow table for now. Whatever. And then throughout the rest of the room, I have tons of shelves hung on the walls to store collector's edition toys, VHS tapes, game cases, software cases. I've got VHS tapes of Pokemon games, signed graphics cards, things like that. And then actually right above here, I have a couple shelves, one which is holding a giant collector's edition, but then you can see these two totes, which actually hold most of my controllers. So I have those stored up there, and it's just very much, kind of, the shelf is very secured so it doesn't fall down on top of my cameras and everything. And then over here, we've got two little standing shelves. One is a dedicated VHS mounted, VHS sized shelf for some of my VHS collection, as you usually see in the backdrop. Then I've got another one that's normal DVD case size, so it holds most of my GameCube collection, some of my Wii collection, and then a bunch of DVDs and Blu-rays. And then back here's a little drawer system with my Darksiders Genesis statue on it, and then just holds little knickknacks and cords and stuff that I need for the retro room. Which lastly brings us to this closet. This is, of course, a normal closet for the room. We use it for a lot of our clothes overflow since I have so many shirts for like videos and things like that. But in the bottom I have SGI CRT. I've got drawers upon drawers upon drawers for systems and cables. I've got a bunch of storage in the bottom, and then the shelf up top holds my VHS overflow, magazine overflow, some older consoles, collector's edition boxes, and things like that. So like I said, as dense as possible in here. You may also kind of notice, although you probably can't see it from most of the camera angles, but I actually have here, you really can't see it, so I'm going to get video with my phone here. I actually have a curtain rod mounted to the ceiling here, and that was a pain in the ass to install from here, I actually had one of my sound blankets with that little cassette tape, what was called a wall canvas, in front of it, so it looked cool, to help absorb some of the sound here, because this room was very echoey and reverby when I first started filming in it. So I had one of my big producer's choice sound blankets hanging from here back when I was actually filming over there. So I would sit over there and talk this way, so my sound waves would hit the sound blanket, and it was very effective at deadening the sound. And in fact, the room has suffered ever since I took it out, but I took it out for two reasons. One being, we adopted our little kitten Ollie, who when we kept him locked in here, he would climb it up and then jump down, and I was worried about his well-being. And then I never really put it back up because it blocked off the closet too much, and I really wanted to use the closet because the space was kind of supposed to be my space for like buying, trading, and selling retro stuff. So I wanted the closet for space for that. I'm kind of a hoarder with some of that stuff, so I never really sold much. I was just never got around to it. And I just felt like it imposed on the room too much. So that was left up for mounting purposes, but otherwise hasn't been used. But you can see here, the entire ceiling is covered in sound foam, especially around the parts where I normally talk, including back in that corner, to help compensate for it. And of course, this is cheap sound foam. It doesn't do a whole lot overall, but when you have as much as I do and as much as I've collected over the years and densely put it in spaces where you're talking a whole lot, it does eventually become effective at kind of deadening some of the extra reverb in the space. So as we wrap up here, I wanted to talk about future expansion possibilities. I've already posted and I will be doing moving vlogs. We are moving to a space where I have a 24 by 24 space to build my next office, studio, game room, whatever into. And so the main workflow problems that I will be solving there comes from unifying my workspace. Instead of having 3 rooms spread out, because my office, my computer desk area, was in our living room on one side, then we had our living room section, and then we had my workbench and server rack on the other side of it. So that was like a 6-purpose room there. So I already had that work divided, and then I had my studio space where I shot B-roll and what is now the baby room, and then this was my game room / stream room. I'm unifying my workspace into one cohesive workspace where everything's together. I always have access to everything, and it's going to be a bigger and deeper space, which gives me a lot more room for more creative B-roll, for more creative filming, and I can still leave up dedicated sets like this for my game room and things like that. So the game room will expand, the office will expand, the studio space will expand, and it will all be together as like, you know, a unified place. But I also want to address like kind of issues that I've run into in this space, such as some of the camera angles ended up not going used, so I want to address that a little bit. My little unboxing cam here with the webcam you can see right here, I want to be an actual overhead mounted camera so I don't have to fight with it hanging off the monitor the whole time. I've got things like, right now, my main shot for this entire set has the PlayStation logo in the background. It's awesome. It gets me a lot of cool comments. I love it. Cool factor is times a million. However, whenever I'm doing sponsored reads or something, I have to switch over to this camera, which is not facing my monitor and makes it really awkward to read from a script or anything, because this, while there are still logos in the background, they're much more blurred out and not an issue. And sponsors are going to be much more okay with that versus literally having someone's name and giant logo in the background of their sponsored read or branded videos or whatever. This just kind of poses a bit of a problem. And so I want to move it a little bit so it can still be in camera on certain shots, but not literally centerfold in my main camera angle as it is here. And little things like that. There's going to be a lot of changes. I'm going to have a ton of moving content, you know, as I build up the new studio, lessons I learn, lessons I want to teach you with this, you know, optimizing for small spaces, all of that. And I can't wait to show you, but it is kind of bittersweet that we're finally saying goodbye to the space that I spent the past 2.5 years really building up and making into the awesome space it is now, with the posters and the decorations, pins on the shelves. Like, every month I was adding to this or optimizing it in some capacity, and it's finally all going away. So I really cannot thank you enough for all of your support in 2020. It has been amazing, despite the fact that this has been a terrible year all around for the channel and for the support you all have given me. It has been absolutely incredible, and it's part of the reason I'm able to do so many big things like this. And I can't wait to show you the new space, and I really think you're gonna love it. So get subscribed, check out my next generation console coverage if you haven't seen it already, and yeah, look forward to Streamer News Season 3 in the new space, and with some tweaks to the format, as well as a lot more from this space moving forward, or well, from the new space moving forward, as well as teardowns of this space and all of that. Thanks so much. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe for more tech content. I'm losing my talking ability here. Subscribe for more tech content and stream education. That still didn't sound right. I'll see you next time. I'm EposVox. Bye.